So, the translations are out for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 427, and let's just say that this chapter concludes a interesting plot point in the world of My Hero Academia involving not just Spinner, but also Eri. So, I'm just gonna jump right into the review of this chapter because, hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Andrew, and I'm here to do my manga review for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 427 titled Who Was Tomura Shigaraki? And I'm try to have minimal editing in this video, so pardon if there are any pauses in this video or just small dead spots. I'll try to do my best to prevent that from happening and just allow my thoughts to flow a little bit more naturally since I'm recording this immediately after reading the chapter. So my thoughts and my opinions are going to be fresh. So let's dive into the review and really talk about what's going on in this chapter because there is a lot. And for starters, the chapter is in a structure that is very different. The title of the chapter itself, which is Who Was Tomura Shigaraki, is titled in a way as it is a TV special, and throughout the chapter we get interviews from a reporter talking to the heroes, or should I say the civilians, about what they think about Tomura Shigaraki. And there are a lot of different opinions, but a lot of them are more negative. We have someone saying that he was scary, another individual who was a student who was like, oh yeah, he killed our friend and he destroyed my house. We even get to see the old lady that didn't help Tomura Shigaraki in the past about how he was unable to stop and that she doesn't know why, as we have other random people thinking that he was just a random thug that caused all of this destruction. Pretty much what they're saying is that they have no idea and had no understanding of how much destruction that he would cause, and that even if we have heroes from around the world helping to rebuild Japan in this moment, that there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be reconstructed, and that there are still dead areas where they need to go to because potentially another Tomura or another All for One could be in those areas. As we cut over to Spinner having a conversation with Deku, which is going to take up a major chunk of this chapter. And there's some interesting dialogue that we really need to discuss when it comes to this conversation. For instance, one of the first things that comes out of Spinner's mouth is that Deku is a murderer. And this is something that I wanted to make a video on, about whether or not Deku was actually a murderer or whether or not he actually killed Tomura Shigaraki. And from the perspective of Spinner, he definitely did. And what's interesting about it is that Deku doesn't deny it. And this kind of changes my perspective on the situation when it involves Deku. It doesn't take away from what Deku necessarily did and how I feel as if what he did is not necessarily quote unquote murder or killing, or at least it's not something that was more directly on him. Well, yes, he did land a blow on Tomura Shigaraki that could have potentially scattered his body was already deteriorating by the fact that he was giving him the power of one for all. So to say that he landed like the final killing blow on him and that is what makes him a murderer is not really accurate. And though he was a hero at the moment, and that within the story we know that heroes aren't necessarily having the jurisdiction to just do extrajudicial killings. However, we need to remember that the heroes during the war had more or less free range potentially on what they would be doing with the villains, just purely due to the fact that the police force was involved and that they literally created a quote-unquote flying coffin for Tomura Shigaraki with the expectation that the heroes were going to kill him. So at this moment, there may have been legal ramifications that would have actually allowed for Deku in this moment to kill Tomura Shigaraki. And we have to remember that when it comes to what murder actually is, it's the unjust killing of an individual. And in the case of what's happening with Tomura Shigaraki, with him trying to destroy everything and potentially kill a lot of people, it may not be seen as unjust, especially from what we've seen in the chapter of how people felt about Tomura Shigaraki and the actions that he did. And this is going to be very political because many people equate the heroes to being like the police force, and that the police, even though that they have the jurisdiction to kill people, that they can still commit murders But this situation itself is a little bit more different because Tomura Shigaraki was more or less an active terrorist. So the idea of killing him in this way may not be seen as murder via the law. But this is all based off the perspective of Spinner, and this is something that we as people also see. You may see someone being killed, and if you really cared for them and valued them, it doesn't matter whether or not it was legal or not, it's still going to be perceived as murder from your perspective. And this is something that most likely Deku understands, because he may not believe or forgive Tomura for what he has done, but he still viewed him as a human, and he took his life in a way, so he feels guilty for it. So that's why even if he may not necessarily be a murderer by the legal perspective, he'll accept that upon himself, because that's the type of character that he is. He feels regret and remorse by the fact that he was unable to save Tomura's physical body. And this is just the start of the conversation that we have between Spinner and Deku. We have the actual Mushroom Doctor pretty much confirming a theory that people may or may not have about Spinner, about how he was basically turning into a Nomu with the multiple quirks that he had, and that in a way he was becoming a pretty much brain dead, and that by doing so and doing the research on the Nomu, they were pretty much able to prevent that from happening. But what is very interesting about what we're getting between Deku and Spinner in this moment is that we're really getting to see the perspective of how Spinner saw Tomura Shigaraki, because he starts off by not being able to understand why Tomura wanted to leave the final message only to him, about how he, until the end, wanted to destroy everything, and that he's questioning, well, what about Dabi? What about Toga? Why did he specifically want this conversation to be had with me? And this just agitates Spinner to the point where his body begins to grow due to the quirks that are still inside of him, which means that while they were able to prevent the nullification by like frying his brain, he still very much has the quirks inside of him, and how he's trying to understand like why this is all happening, and that he pretty much goes into this monologue about how Tomura Shigaraki was his everything, his ray of light, his hero, that he loved to do the exact same things that he did, that when society shunned him, he went towards video games. And Tomura also liked playing video games. He also liked playing the exact same games that he did, and that Spinner viewed Tomura more than just a hero, but as his first friend. And how this is juxtaposed with people who are just criticizing Tomura Shigaraki by saying that, oh yeah, he's a horrible person, that he destroyed everything, and that they were going and looking more into who Tomura Shigaraki was, and that while they do understand why he came to the point that he is right now, that they can't really empathize with him. And I think that this is very interesting, because while they may not necessarily be able to empathize, I repeated that 3 ways because I still cannot say if I said it correctly, but the point that I'm making is that while they can't do that, they can pretty much sympathize with him, understand where he's coming from, while still condoning his actions. And that's what we're really getting in this chapter. We're seeing the sympathetic side of Tomura Shigaraki through Spinner, because no matter how you view it, Spinner was in fact a friend to Tomura Shigaraki, and Tomura Shigaraki was a friend to Spinner. That is something that we cannot ignore, which is why we're getting the juxtaposition between what Spinner is saying and what the civilians, the other people, are saying with this program. While people are saying that he was a monster, Spinner is saying that he was his first friend. So it's very great that we're able to get this in this chapter, to really understand that while we may not be able to forgive what Tomura did, and that the actions that he did were very bad, that he still was a person at the core of it. And that what was able to calm down Spinner in this moment is Deku confirming to Spinner that, yeah, Tomura felt the exact same way. That's why he was wanting me to leave this message to you, and he reveals that the Lee was always at the core of his heart. So this is a very emotional moment and a very catharsis, like peak for when it comes to Tomura Shigaraki. And while we didn't necessarily get the conversation or understand whether or not he actually cared about the League of Villains and what happened to them after they potentially died, we all know from this conversation with Spinner that he definitely, when it comes to Tomura Shigaraki, cared for the League. And that this gives Spinner a different perspective about what if he had taken that first step. That if he had taken that first step in the cave, maybe he could have saved his hero, he could have saved his friend. Which is really just an encompassing ideal of My Hero Academia, is that people who may not necessarily see themselves as heroes taking those steps to potentially help someone, whether or not they wanted it or whether or not they necessarily deserve it. It's just taking that first step being the most important part. So I really like that this theme is emphasized a little bit more about the idea that potentially anyone can be anyone's hero. They just have to actually take the active route to go down that path. So that's very cool. I really enjoyed that, and they emphasize once again that there may be a new All for One Tomura Shigaraki out there, which is going to most likely tie into that villain that we saw at the end of the 2 chapters ago, at the pretty much initial start of the epilogue. And this is where we get the ending of the conversation between Tomura Shigaraki, or should I say the conversation about Tomura Shigaraki between Spinner and Deku. And what's very interesting about this is that as Deku is leaving, Spinner says that, yeah, no, I'm not gonna forget Tomura Shigaraki. I'm going to read and like spread his gospel. I'm gonna write a book because y'all heroes are just gonna forget him and just live your happy, dappy, smiling lives. And then you just have Deku chiming in, it's like, you should make a comic instead. It's like, what? Yeah. Oh, by the way, there's one thing that you're misunderstanding. I'm not gonna forget Tomura Shigaraki. And he says it with a very determined look on his face, which really just shows that the effect that Tomura Shigaraki had on Deku, and that this is not going to be something that's just going to be like washed away. He's going to forget it like Overhaul. He's going to forget it like Muscular. No, this is something that's going to be embedded in his core from now on, and that this is going to be most likely his driving motivation to what he's going to potentially do with the next new villain. How he's going to learn from the mistakes of what he couldn't succeed with Tomura Shigaraki and bring them over to save this new individual, not just in their heart, but also physically as well. And just with the mention of the comic book ties into the idea of what was able to inspire All for One and One for All, the comic books themselves. So while this may be something that Spinner may be trying to spread like Tomura Shigaraki propaganda as the symbol of fear, it could also just be a tool to help everybody understand who Tomura Shigaraki is, not necessarily sympathize, but empathize with that and potentially help the world change for the better. So I'm glad that we're getting that and getting to get a little bit more understanding of where Deku is coming from, as Spinner leaves a message to Deku as well, to the quote-unquote octopus, to do his best. Once again, tying into the idea that everybody should be doing their best in what they believe is right. And there's the noise that I may want to cut out of this video, but I think I did a fairly good job up until this moment. So let's continue with this review and try to finish it up, because the last part of the chapter is just seeing Tsukachi as well as All Might, who's unfortunately in a wheelchair, standing in front of the most likely Who Was Tomura Shigaraki TV program, as they are discussing what happened to Chisake, Overhaul, where it's revealed that instead of just allowing him to have a conversation with Eri and to pretty much forgive her, we actually get the reveal of something that I've always wanted to happen within the series, and I'm glad that it's happening now, with the boss of the 8 precepts coming to Chisake and pretty much saying, oh gosh, you look so bad, as you just have Chisake breaking down, saying like, I'm sorry for everything that I did. I'm so glad you're alive. How are you alive? What happened? As we have the boss saying, oh yeah, quirks are crazy, and luckily enough, support items are pretty much keeping me alive. So we don't get like a detailed understanding of what was going on with him, but that the simple idea is that what is happening is that you have a support device that is basically able to wake him up from the coma-like state and keep him active at this moment. We see that he's in a wheelchair, so he's most likely unable to just get up on his own, which it's very much a running theme when it comes to what we've seen with the elderly generation, that they are all pretty much wheelchair bound. But what he's saying in this moment is that, yeah, no, oh, by the way, I'm not the boss. The organization is over. You strayed from the path of humanity. This is the result. We were too easy on you, and I regret it. And I'm going to make you sit here and think about the fact that you will need to apologize to Eri for the rest of your life, because she's going to forget about you, but I'm going to make sure that you never forget what you did about her until the day that I die. And woo, chills. This is what I wanted him to say to Overhaul Chisake for the longest time. And the fact that we're getting it now, chef's kiss. Once again, this is in the background, but I'm just going to keep going, flowing with the ideas, because I really like this. This really is the best way we could have put a cap on Overhaul's arc, because while yes, he is still alive, he has to suffer. This isn't a similar atonement to Endeavor. No, this is just pure straight up punishment. He is going to be punished. He's going to have no interactions with Eri. He's going to be forgotten. He's lost his arms. He cannot even use his quirk at all. This is pure punishment for his actions. This is not atonement. Overhaul is actually not going to atone. He's just going to be punished. He's going to be in jail and see the person that he cares about the most criticizing him for the rest of his life. And then when he dies, he has to live with the thought that the last things that the people that he cared about most are like basically him saying to you, yeah, you're a disappointment and I'm going to punish you for the rest of my life. Whoo! Best thing that could have happened to Overhaul's story. And that's not the end of the chapter, unfortunately. We do have Deku trying to understand how they need to prevent things, to which you have Tsukachi joking. It's like, yeah, but you know, Hawks could just make heroes like by multiple numbers, and it was a joke, but Deku took that seriously. And I think that is something that we could address. That potentially Hawks could make a lot more people heroes, not necessarily older heroes that quit, but have everyone have a sort of like hero license where everyone learns how to be a hero, maybe not to the same extent to like fight the villains, but to help someone that is like lost, or to help in rescue operations. Just think about how many heroes are currently in Japan right now from foreign countries, and now just imagine if the people in the country themselves had the ability to use their own quirks to help. That's kind of the idea that I'm thinking that may be hinting to in the future, where everyone can be a hero, to where everyone can be the greatest hero, and that if you are a hero, you don't have to rely on someone else to help, or another hero to help, because you yourself are a hero. Just imagine what would have happened if that old lady or all those people there were certified heroes. They could have taken an initial action with their mindset and actually helped him in a way, and would have prevented All For One and Tomura Shigaraki from doing what they did right now. So that's an idea to keep in your back of the head. It may be a joke, but it may actually come to reality later on towards the last 3 chapters. But yeah, pretty much as the story ends, we have All Might most likely telling Deku that they need to prepare for the first years, because he's about to meet them, as we end the chapter with a whole bunch of first year girls screaming, "Todoroki senpai, Dynamite senpai, can we get your number please?" as they're running away, to the shock and chagrin of both Deku and Mineta as the chapter ends. So, let me just say this. I thought this was a fantastic chapter. This chapter, when I first read the leaks, made me tear up. And while unfortunately I didn't tear up while reading it and reviewing it, it still was impactful emotionally. There was like a lot of emotional gut punch, especially from Spinner in his conversation with Deku. I think that Horikoshi handled this perfectively, as well as when it comes to the conversation between Overhaul, Chisake, the boss. All of that was also done great. And the symbolism in this chapter was done perfectively, so were the motifs. Everything was done to near perfection. Really enjoyed this chapter, really enjoyed everything about it. The art was on point, and yeah, we have 3 more chapters, and unfortunately My Hero Academia is going to be on break from this week moving forward. So yeah, I won't be seeing y'all for another few weeks, but hopefully this video was done good enough for you to be lasting up until then. So let me ask you this: what did you guys think of the chapter? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? And what was your favorite part of the chapter? Did you like the conversation that Deku had with Spinner? And do you think that Deku is actually a murderer? Leave your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!